Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. It is absolutely a thrill to introduce you to Robert Anderson. Bob has been a pace setter in the field of leadership development for over 30 years. He is the founder and chief knowledge officer of Leadership Circle and the co-author of the books Scaling Leadership and Mastering Leadership. Bob created the Leadership Circle Profile, a 360 assessment used by organizations worldwide to measure the effectiveness of their leaders, both individually and collectively, chart a pathway for their development, and assess their progress as they develop. And I first became familiar with Bob as part of my certification in the Leadership Circle Profile 360 assessment tool. And I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to use it myself and with clients. Bob received a bachelor's degree in economics from John Carroll University and a master's degree in organizational development from Bowling Green State University. In 2005, the Steyer Center for Executive Education at the University of Notre Dame Mendoza College of Business awarded Bob the Partner in Innovation Award. In addition, the MECO Leadership Institute awarded him the International Thought Leader of Distinction in 2018. And Bob, it is truly a joy and a huge honor to have you here with us. Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
So one of the things that I am super curious about is something called integral leadership. I've had the honor of reading a paper that you wrote on that and learning a little bit about it. Would you be willing to share with our audience, first of all, what integral leadership is and how you got into this body of work?
Yeah. Well, how I got into the body of work is a long story, life journey. Maybe we'll tell some of that along the way. In our framework, there are stages of growth and development that we pull in from the field of adult development work of, Robert Keegan and Susan Cook-Greuter and others, Terry O'Fallon, just to name a few. And that basically they outline that if adults evolve or develop, they evolve through certain progressive and measurable stages. And they're distinct. And with each stage comes greater efficacy in the midst of complexity. Most of us are challenged by complexity today. So later stage development or higher levels of leadership is becoming a strategic priority for many organizations right now. And most of the field, if you look at the field of leadership development, is targeting what we call creative leadership and moving from what we call reactive leadership. And you see it all across the field. This Larry Wilson's play to win, play not to lose versus play not to lose. Arbinger's work, in the box, out of the box, and so on, above the line, below the line, inner game, self one, self two, all of these different frameworks. Robert Fritz's work, creative and reactive, which is the language that I imported into our work. When I first saw all these different frameworks, I realized they're all talking about the same thing. But I didn't realize until I read Bob Keegan's work that these are sequentially organized. In other words, we tend to move from adolescence into what Bob Keegan calls a socialized mind. We're now operating from the traditional mindset, cultural conditioning that we've taken on. I need to show up this way in order to get along go along to get along. And that's a really important move for an adolescent. And if you had adolescents, you get it. They finally decided to play by the rules, and that level of mind can take us a long way until it reaches limits. And most of the ways we're describing leadership today, that is purposeful, visionary, authentic, self-aware, systems aware, very relationally capable, emotionally intelligent, all that kind of language is vintage leadership that shows up at the next order of mind, which Bob Kagan called self-authoring.
Mm.
So in the reactive, we're authored by the surround. We're authored by the expectations of others more than we are by ourselves, more than we know. And we're trying to live up to the expectations of all these different messages and voices in our surrounding environment, bosses, people that may be long dead, um, from our past and so on. Then there's a fundamental shift, and it's a big shift if we make it, and only about 20% of adults really start to configure at this level of self-authoring. I move from an external focus in psych language, it's external locus of control. I still have all that, but it doesn't have me in the same way. It's not on autopilot. I'm starting to configure for the first time an inner sense of who I am and what I'm about, and what matters, and therefore the leadership that boots up on that is more purpose driven, self-authoring of purpose, vision. I'm creating my leadership as an authentic expression of that. I get good at difficult conversations. I become more relationally capable, um, and so on. It's a very high achieving, very effective form of leadership, and all of our research supports it. And then there's about 5% of leaders who operate at the next level, which you're calling integral. And there's a lot of markers for this. So I move, if you follow the trajectory, from being authored by others to being self-authored. And in the move to integral, I begin to surrender that hard-earned self-authoring self for one that's authored. Not by the expectations of everybody's idea of who I should be, but authored by something larger, which seems to want to have its way with me, with our organization. And so the relationship here to vision and purpose and direction is one of being pulled forward by an emergent future that wants or even needs our participation. And emergent means I don't even know what it is. It's like the sun is just coming up on the horizon. I know there's something there about to emerge, but I don't yet see it. And so we're being pulled, like you are, toward a sunset. We're being pulled forward, and it emerges as we move toward it. And so that's one marker. And it takes a unique capacity to work in the unknown. And of course, with the level of complexity that we're in, and I think it's even beyond complexity now. Yes, we have to manage all this disruption and complexity and help our organizations navigate through all that. But we're also at a particularly challenging, if not calamitous, time in the history of humanity, in our relationship with the planet and our relationship with each other. And the old order is being shown for what it is. It's imploding. It's not sustainable. And the new order hasn't been written. And so we are challenged with rightening society, rightening our relationship to the planet, to each other, to all the systems, therefore, need changing and redesigning. So we're in a huge challenge with all of that. And it has leaders at every level in every organization over their head with the complexity of that. Honda, one of our clients, just announced a year or so ago their second founding. They're envisioning, mind you, they're the largest manufacturer of internal combustion engines in the world, and they're going all electric.
Mm.
by 2050, but 85% by 2035. Now, that's a very aggressive schedule. So they not only have to manage their current fleet and stay in world industry leadership, they have to reinvent it. They want to be a completely carbon neutral company. They want a regenerative manufacturing cycle. So their cars are completely cradle to grave, regenerated, recycled. They're they actually envision no deaths, no fatalities in any of their vehicles. They can make them that safe. So it's a beautiful vision when you get up close to it. And it's right for the planet. So it's right for the people, right for the planet, right for profits, all that stuff. And they're taking it seriously. But the leadership in the middle of that is overwhelmed with the complexity. And so this is what I mean by being authored by an emergent future and the level of complexity we're in with both thriving in a complex environment, but rewriting the future is huge. And organizations, some of them are starting to really take that on. And it requires integral leadership. It requires this relationship with being authored and working in the unknown, being emergent. It requires more intuitive capacity that we think of intuition as it's really not mainstream. I'm trying to bring it more mainstream because if you really get close to the people who invent, they'll talk about intuition. Scientists, physicists, mathematicians. On our website is an interview I did with Federico Fagin. Federico is the inventor of the microprocessor. He invented the technology that made the computer chip possible and the first computer chip. And he remembers the eureka aha moment when it's like, that's it. And it all came in at once, and then he had to unpack it because there was so much information condensed it took some doing to figure it out, but it all came in at once. There's also an interview there with um, uh, uh, Dr. David Wiebers, who's one of the leading neurologists in the world in the area of stroke care, stroke epidemiology and care. And he tells a story in that interview of the entire neurological profession vexed by conflicting, thorough research that gave directly conflictual results about the way a stroke progresses and when it becomes operable and when not to operate. It was completely opposite. I don't get all the science of it, but nobody could figure it out. He got it in the shower in a moment. And he tells a story. It took 20 years of research by the whole world community to evaluate what he called that thought ball. It all came in at once and do the research, and it all proved out to be true. That's what I mean by innovation or invention. And given the challenge we're in to invent the future, that capacity to be informed by a field of intelligence, which we now understand to be a quantum field, and how it's organized. Quantum physics is groundbreaking here. There is only an informational field, and we are of it, and therefore have access to it in ways that our current mental models don't allow. So to begin to help leaders access more open and available states of awareness, both individually and together in dialogue being another component here, the capacity to sit together in the unknown and be informed by what's trying to come through. Sounds woo-woo, but it's actually good physics and proven intuitive capacity and right at the heart of science and invention, innovation. So those are a few. The other, I think, important markers for what's emergent at this integral leadership level is a greater capacity to face our shadows, to face the parts of us that aren't this authentic self-authoring person, right? Yes, I have that. That doesn't go away, but I have more than that, right, in me. This is where Jekyll meets Hyde, where the inner masculine both meets their inner feminine in the ways they've oppressed the feminine, and vice versa, and so on. So this is a very gutty, gritty, challenging work, ultimately liberating. And when we do it with leaders, every leader that we've worked with in our workshops that just touches into this place and is surprised by it. I didn't know that was in me, and certainly not to that degree. They report later a far greater sense of inner freedom, creativity, flow in their life. And they're very grateful, even just for a short moment of meeting that part of themselves. And, but that also unconstricts the field of the body. Everything is a field in quantum theory, so that the flow of energy is higher, both in a wider bandwidth, in other words, more frequency bandwidth you can run through your body, and frequency in science is information. So energy is information. So I have more information informing and animating my life. And it's less distorted by old wounds and constrictions and resistances and unconscious biases that you cannot not get growing up in the cultures and that we grow up in, the collective traumas that are in the field and so on. And we all have it in us, whether we're aware of it or not. And we have our personal stories and wounds and traumas around that. And we have intergenerational, collective, all that's in the field. So the capacity to meet all that with compassion, self-compassion, without judgment, frees us up. But it also means that when I look at you, I notice my judgments. And so I'm less likely to turn you into the enemy or to make you up in a way that's not true about you. It's a projection of my shadow. I go, oh, that's me, not you. Oh, you have that in you too. Let's talk. So this capacity then for creating very safe, curious, open space for dialogue, for real breakthrough discussion is greatly enhanced because I'm not so much defending myself or projecting something onto you that isn't actually true. Furthermore, as I get more into my shadow side, I realize that I move from a presumption of my wholeness, that self-authoring. I am this complete, well, hard-earned, visionary, purposeful, value-driven person. Oh no, I have the opposite in me. I'm actually partial. I'm a work in progress in ways I didn't really fully realize. then I realize my position is partial. So I don't go into conversations with the presumption that I have it all figured out. I don't presume wholeness, I presume partialness. And conflict, especially deep conflict, is actually evidence that I don't have it figured out. And I need the corrective of my quote enemy. What is it you see that I don't see? How is my position incomplete and partial? This is integral because it can hold the full complexity. The dysfunction in the system, it becomes much more systemic, is also mirrored in me, right? I am a microcosm of the whole system. And so all things change when we do. If I begin to really shift my orientation, the whole system around me, and I become much more systemic and able to engage that in a way that creates safe and even beyond safe generative space for real breakthrough dialogue, even when it's conflictual. And that capacity to be in conversation, in dialogue, not projecting shadow, staying open and to be informed by what's trying to come through, and all of that sort of step by step inventing the future together is what we're calling integral leadership. And it's well beyond creative capacity, which is well beyond reactive capacity for dealing with complex systems and change. The last thing I would say about it is, and really at the core of it, is as everything I've talked about opens and unfolds, my presence becomes transformative. I begin to resonate, again, a physics term, resonance, in a way that is a transmission. I walk in the room, people get that it's safe to talk. I'm holding the resonance of what's trying to happen. I'm holding the possibility of what's trying to happen. And then what wants to happen can happen because the field sets up in a way that allows it to happen. And you know when you're in the presence of that, you know when you're in a room, a group of people, where something happens that sets the whole room up. And you go, everybody's galvanized, everybody's focused, and everybody can play their best game. And they're curious and listening and open and exploring together. That's the kind of presence that these kind of leaders can bring. We have this fun statement that we got from one of our clients: leaders bring the weather. And kind of in a playful way, it's like either reactive weather or creative weather. It's either really stormy, and you know right away when it's stormy, and it's like, okay, we're not going to be very effective today because. But if you take that further, leaders can also bring a very powerful energetic to the entire organization. And the first time I encountered this, I was going to see my insurance agent, and I was feeling really lousy. I wasn't feeling well. I don't know. This was years ago. And this particular man founded this insurance agency, and they were the most, I think, the largest in the country. And he personally made the $1 million roundtable on the first business day of every year. That's how much life insurance he personally was blowing through him. He was an extraordinary human being and a real mentor to me and to many in the community. I walked in There was nobody in the lobby. So I just sat down and waited for some receptionist or somebody to show up. And within a few minutes, I started to feel better. I mean, it was noticeably. My whole energy picked up. I went, wow, I feel completely different at walking in this building. Within 5 minutes, I was felt fine. And I hadn't talked to anybody yet. And I never forgot it. I said, wow, this is a remarkable culture in this business. Remarkable, energetic. So that's how I think about integral leadership.
Thank you.
The other thought that just came in is that I'm actually calling it unity informed, because the next stages, and it's more than one, beyond that are higher and higher forms of what the wisdom traditions have called unity awarenesses. And there are different levels of that realization. But as you start to really surrender the self from authored to being authored, and you do the shadow work and you open up, you start to access directly a larger reality beyond what we consider to be the body and rational mind. And this is, again, beyond our mental models. But as Federico Fagin, this inventor of the microchip, is actually writing now physics. He's a physicist. He's writing the physics of a conscious universe. Here's how everything is conscious. It's not an artifact of evolution. It's the evolving source of evolution. It's the other way around. Consciousness is a priori, and then things evolve into more complex forms and more consciously complex forms. And so he's actually writing the physics of that. And so and he talks about the fact that your experience, what he calls the qualia of your experience, the feelings, the knowing of something, when you comprehend something for the first time. That's a quantum, that experience is happening in the quantum you. This is a classical quantum entity. It's your avatar here in his language. Now, David Weaver's, this world-renowned neurologist, starts one of his books by saying your consciousness nor your thinking, your brain is not responsible for your consciousness nor your thinking. That when you get into quantum neurology and quantum biology, the emerging paradigm is that the brain is a transceiver, and that you are more than what you take to be your physical body. And that's just straight quantum physics. Everything is emerging from a unified quantum field. And that's, as Einstein said, matter is energy at a frequency that's low enough to be perceptible. There is no matter. This is Einstein, there's only energy at a low enough frequency to be perceptible. But that doesn't mean that's the whole of the quantum reality. No, it's actually almost nearly infinite when you look at the smallest wavelength of the quantum length. It's a vast field of frequency and information possibilities. So we are that field, the whole thing at every level is precipitating us, what we call us, the body. And so what Federico says is if you're cut off from, if you think of yourself as merely a physical body, then you're literally cut off from the quantum you, the quantum experience. And so all of this presumes a paradigm, a new paradigm of reality that's emerging, that's much more unitive, where unity is the fundamental presumption. And um, and that what not Thoreau, Emerson said is actually the case, that we lie in the lap of immense intelligence and we're the receivers of its truths and the organs of its activity. This is now the emerging science, but it also dovetails with the great traditions, North, South, East, West, Indigenous, and so on. This understanding of fundamental reality has been known for millennia, described in a different language system. But when you start to put the science next to the traditions, you go, oh, they're describing the same thing. And so I think there's an emergent paradigm that presumes an inherent unity. And so integral, informed by unity, informed. And Jude Currivan, this physicist, plays with the word in-formed. So it's informing form. This is the nature of the field. It informs form. It's an informational field forming form, right? And we are that. And so most of our ways of thinking about all that actually cut us off from it. And that's a real deterrent to the challenge we're in, which is to break through economically, our financial systems, our energy systems, our economic systems, our governance systems, the way we design organizations, the way we think about our relationship to the planet and tend to that. All of that needs to be reinvented. And nobody knows how. And we have all the information we need if we learn how to access it. Furthermore, the work of Joe Dispenza, Joe went to one of his workshops, a 7-day intensive workshop. And I mean intensive, like you're meditating like 8 hours a day. And the days go from like 5 in the morning till 8 at night. I mean, and it's really not meditation in the kind of traditional sense. It's energetic practice. It's opening up the field of the body to the energetic flows and informing the body. Well, they're doing research with University of Southern California, San Diego, where they're doing, he'll have 7,000 people come to a workshop for a week. So they'll get 1,000 blood samples and they'll sequence the DNA. They'll measure 3,000 metabolites in the blood. They collect about the same number of stool samples. So people are quite generous with. Now this is pre and post, and they're finding major changes in 7 days in epigenetics, DNA coding, blood work, massive microbiome, massive changes in the direction of health, and far beyond clinical trials. So the scientists are blown away and baffled by it, but they can't deny what they see in the data. And so they're doing research together. So what this also suggests is the ability for us to actually access the field and shape it or inform it and manifest more directly our futures. So we all know in the kind of creative place, creative level of understanding, the secret, the power of intention, getting clear on vision and focus and choiceful, and what that does to usher in the future that we desire or aspire to. This is taking that another level. How do we do that at very high levels of information density, frequency, and energy density, and manifest even more, both powerfully and at faster timeframes? So there's a lot here that's emerging that sits on a different paradigm than the one that we've grown up in about the nature of reality. And it's largely been relegated to the new age woo-woo. But the emerging scientific paradigm is saying, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Let's not dismiss all that too quickly, because there's a fundamental reality that actually we're starting to understand how it operates.
And that's very
So
exciting, isn't it?
yeah, it's exciting stuff. And I'm where I love and hate to be. I'm out on the edge of irrelevance, learning from leading edge, and then trying to figure out
Mm.
if and how to make it relevant to hard practical realities of running an organization and leading an organization. And I do think there's relevance here, and so we're working on how do we distill that and not dumb it down, and frame it up in a way that both from a framing standpoint, people go, oh, okay, I get it. I think that there's something here. And then experientially, they go, oh, wow, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And so far, so good on that, but we still have a ways to go.
There is, I believe, a connection, as you believe that there is a connection there. And, this is a connection that's similar in other areas. For example, last night I had a conversation with a woman, a physician named and researcher named Dr. Shamini Jan, and she studies, and this institute called the Consciousness and Healing Institute studies the impact of energy and different energy modalities on healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's still a lot of unknowns as to the mechanisms, but there's enough research now showing that there is something, that some people are able to do certain things and to heal.
Yeah.
Of course, not necessarily instead of allopathic medicine, but, and it's the same thing with leadership. I think that these different levels of leadership, Dr. Keegan's work, as you brought up, from the kind of egocentric to reactive to creative, right? That self-authoring to the integral, right? Being authored by, right? Surrendering to this emergent, unity-informed consciousness, is absolutely critical for every leader to understand and to, I believe, learn more about. And this is, I see, as the solution to many of the issues that our planet is currently experiencing. Talk to anybody, and there's obviously immense amounts of chaos and discord in our world, and many people are feeling hopeless, helpless. And yet, in this model or framework, this more integrated framework, I believe that there is a great deal of hope. And I do believe that in a coherent, objective state that we can access, these downloads, as you call them, the insights that are ready for us to receive in order to create higher solutions that are, supportive of all, including the physical planet, animals, and so on.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, for the leaders that are listening today, wherever they are in their leadership journey, why do they need to learn about this? Why is this important for them? Like, what's in it for them?
Well, it would depend on the leader that I'm talking to. In other words, most leaders are um, working their way more from reactive territory into more creative territory, if we want to kind of label what that transition. And that's really fundamental. It's like Keegan has this amazing statement that I missed in my first couple of readings of his book, In Over Our Heads, where he describes the capacities that come online with this self-authoring capability to really be direct and honest and straight and clean in your communication, to be a visionary and collaborative and so on and so forth. And he makes a statement something like, if we could just learn that, the world would be a different place. Um, of course, we have many examples of not that. So I think the first work is this work of getting, much more self-authoring and ownership of yourself and seeing into your reactive conditioning. And from there, when you consolidated that kind of level of leadership, you start to say, okay, what's next? And how can I take my leadership to the next level or contribute at the next level? And that's where this becomes more relevant. Now, that said, I do think there's applications here that I'm not, in fact, I know I'm not accurate in saying that intuition or these kind of capacities we talked about emerge at later stages. You can have access to this at any stage. And there are many who do. But in our primarily Western paradigm, we dismiss all of that. So we don't develop it. So some of what I was talking about with Joe Dispenza's work, I mean, he's positioning that directly in the reactive to creative transition. And if you listen to his framing around it, it's clearly going at a kind of autopilot victim orientation and saying, no, 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 you can create and create much more powerfully. And so the application of some of this access to greater capacity to manifest through accessing the field directly isn't necessarily a later stage capacity. We tend to be more open to it, I think, at later stages, or because once we start to realize we don't have it all figured out. And I do think that at least in the Eastern mind, this is much more available. That Eastern traditions, Taoism, and so on, this is modus operandi. And so there's a Frederick So, a business owner and leader, large conglomerate, originally out of China and then Hong Kong, and I think they're in Singapore now. I'm not sure where they're based, but I talked to him recently, and he's leading one of the boldest experiments in consciousness development I've seen, and it's all coming from his deep understanding and practice of Taoism, Zen Buddhism, Confucianism. And his statement is consciousness is capital. So if we can really expand consciousness and awareness and be in the flow of the Tao, as the Taoist would say, and move with the Tao as the Tao, then we have access and are become much more masterful in our ability to. All of that is uh, the Western mind is kind of colonizing the world. But if you look at Eastern, fundamentally Eastern mind, this is like right up the alley of Eastern practices. And so I think there's a opportunity here to bridge East and West into a higher order understanding of leadership and co-creation.
Absolutely. Another form of
Integral.
exactly integral consciousness. And we've had various experts on this podcast that have spoken about this intuition. We've had Dr. Dean Radin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who we did a whole episode on that, and Dr. Deborah Rosman through the Institute of Heart Math speak about this. And we've also had other experts like Lynn McTaggart speak about the field. And we've had many experts speak about integrating the shadow and about managing polarities, if you will, that both and integrative mindset. And so what I'm curious about, and I imagine that many of the leaders listening are now curious about, is how? How do I do this? I want to be one of those leaders that is able to be more objective, to be able to not operate out of my reactive conditioning, my limiting mindsets, right? I want to have more of that, this breakthrough dialogue, as you called it, and to create good for myself, my company, and and the planet at large. How do we do this?
Well, it's a big question. And again, it depends. What's good practice at one level might not be the right practice at another level. But you said, how do we move beyond our reactive mindsets? Well, that's why I designed the leadership circle, was to measure both the creative mind and how it's being deployed in terms of creative competencies and reactive strategies that I'm run that might be impeding the full deployment of that creative self. And so that kind of feedback and deep inquiry with a good coach can go a long way. And at its essence, it's getting clear, it's love and fear, clear about what matters, that's bigger than my fear. What do I want to create? Who do I want to become? And who do I have to become in order to create what I want to be creating? Contributing what I want to contribute. What's my vision of greatness for my leadership? For the results we're creating, that's the heart of the creative orientation. It's vision focused. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about creating what matters. And then you run into your ways you're showing up that are less than effective. And the work is to get underneath it, to become a student of those patterns and trace them to core fears, core survival fears. If I'm not this way, I'm dead. If I'm not the one who's always getting high performing results, and I'm a failure, and it's a short, slippery slope to. If you get underneath a reactive pattern, you'll always find a story like that I adopted young. And I've attached my identity to it. This makes me a worthwhile person. I'm really good at getting results. I'm really brilliant, good with ideas. I'm really a kind and loving and supportive person. And these things make me me. Well, that's actually not true. And the more we identify with it, the more we um, run into limits. So I ran into the first form of that for myself when I was trying to lead in an organization, and I woke up, had a wake up moment where I realized I'm trying to lead and I got to have everybody like me all the time. Like it's not okay if you're disappointed in me. I'm not okay if you're disappointed in me. I can't lead from that.
Mm.
I'm constantly acquiescing, constantly saying yes when I should be saying or mean no, constantly holding back, constantly making it okay, constantly. That's not leadership. There are many forms of that's one form. So the work is this dialectic, this relationship between what am I trying to create that matters, that's bigger than my fear, but I run into my fear in moving toward it. And I have to look at that. I have to get underneath it. I have to deconstruct it. Right. And then at the integral level, it's now I'm being authored by something which wants me. It's a pull. So the same dynamic. And I'm now challenged with going deeper than the reactive into core shadows and woundedness. And and taking on the collective in that, being responsible for the whole thing as it lives in me.
Oh.
So it's uh, the other thing I would say in terms of what you can do. One of the things we're finding is that we can, through fairly simple practices that we've imported from contemplative traditions and from the healing traditions and from martial arts, we can fairly quickly help people access much more grounded, present, powerful states of being under pressure. Like, okay, drop in. And and that immediately brings a different weather to the room. And I now have access to information. So I was talking with a senior healthcare leader recently. So I was in a meeting, very important meeting. We were concluding on a very difficult, challenging issue. And I was wrapping up the meeting and I realized that I'm speaking at them from my head. And I just stopped and went silent. And the whole room got quiet with me. And then I knew what to say. And I spoke from here. And when I was done, the whole room was just sort of in a stunned silence. And one of the senior physician administrators says, that's exactly what we needed to hear and exactly where we need to end this meeting.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. And it just took a moment with a simple practice to get off of the and dropping into presence and then letting it speak.
Yeah.
Letting it do the speaking.
That's right.
Right. And so we practice things like being spoken through, listening to the field and letting it speak me.
That's right.
Right. Let the information just come through. It's all there. I just have to drop in, get out of my okay.
Right.
And that just that subtle shift can be huge for leadership.
And one of the ways to do that that we talked about on this show, of course, there are many, but and it's one that also you mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've been to his events as well, and you know, he trains on coherence and he measures that, of course.
Yep.
And So when we are practicing tools like the quick coherence technique or attitude breathing or any of those where we allow our conscious and unconscious to be integrated, right, head and heart together, then in that moment we are more receptive to non-local intuition. And so I think that one of the really profound mind shifts that leaders are invited to embrace here if they haven't already is a number one, a mindset of curiosity. I certainly am not needing anybody who listens to this to believe a word you say or a word I say. I invite them to be curious and to look at the research and to look at their own life, at what happens, for example, in those moments when they connect with themselves, drop into themselves, as you said, and notice how they feel and notice the results in their life when they have acted on intuitive impulses of thought or behavior from a coherent state when they were in a pleasant, higher state.
Yeah.
And to look at the research that you and others have done about reactive and creative leadership. I know there's a lot of research available
Yeah.
on the Leadership Circle. I'm so deeply grateful for the work that you've done. I imagine there are how many of the assessments have been done at this point? Do you know?
I don't know, keep track of it, but I think we've got over 300,000 leaders, which
Yeah.
means about 3 million surveys,
Yeah.
360 feedback surveys. So a lot of data.
Yes. And it is really incredible to receive feedback, especially in 360 form, and to see that which we may have been blind to. It's been invisible to us, if you will, until it becomes visible. And then once we're aware, then we can choose to explore that, as you said, with a coach. There are many different modalities for releasing patterns that may not serve us anymore, reactive patterns, and to really integrate and liberate certain parts of us that are just not adaptive anymore for us as leaders or as stewards of this planet. What do you think is really important kind of as we move toward completion here? Again, for whether it's an emerging leader or a leader who has shifted into the creative self-authoring stage of development. What do you think that each of them needs to really take from our conversation and practice?
Well, what came as I dropped in was stand still.
Oh.
Yeah, stand still, pay attention. Life is speaking all the time about what matters and what you're here for, and whether you're used to accessing it or not. Those intuitive promptings, those intuitive pulls, information is there. There's a great poem by David Wagoner. It comes from the Native American tradition, and it's what an elder would say to a young boy when asked, "What do I do when I'm lost in the woods?" Now, this is a kind of strange question because the woods is home. So here I am in my own home, lost, and how do I do? And he says, the elder says to the boy, stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost.
Mhm.
Wherever you are is called here. You must meet it. You must greet it as a powerful stranger. Ask permission to know it and be known. and it goes on from there. Um, and so I've had a practice my whole life of paying attention. Because at the end of the poem, he says, if what a tree or a branch does is lost on you, then you are surely lost. And life is constantly saying, oh, here it is. You get lit up. This is exciting. This turns you on. This gets you curious. This like, or I'm bored. I have no interest in this. And all of that is like clues. Life is leaving clues. And then if you learn to just stop and listen, there's a sense of like, oh, I need to do this today. This doesn't feel right. Even though I do it every day, it's not today. Or that subtle just, and if I've done anything well in my life that's led to all that's been created, it's just that. I paid attention and I got taught early to listen to that inner voice, that inner knowing that you just get still and go, okay, yeah, I got it. And like you and I do workshops. I'm sitting in the middle of a day, morning of day 3 in a 5-day workshop. And I'm meditating in the morning, get quiet. All of a sudden, in comes in a completely new design for the 3 days that I had never considered before. And I go, oh shit. Ah, I get it. It feels right. And I don't know how to do it, but let's go. And oh, that inner feeling of rightness I've learned is trustworthy. And it's never let me down.
That's right.
It's when I haven't, when I know I pursued projects for years that in my inner gut was saying, not quite it, not it. And I ignored it. And I worked myself into a considerable amount of debt trying to finance these projects and create these businesses that inside was going, oh, not it. And as soon as I let it go, it showed up.
That's right.
So I've not paid attention and I paid attention. And so that's what I would say is learn to stand still and listen and trust that inner rightness, that knowing, that kind of gut sense. Well, you said head and heart, but I would add pelvis,
Right.
gut
Yeah.
and pelvis. That people who are really creative will often talk about the 3 centers, head, heart, will, including the pelvis wide open. And there's a flow of energy that's actually quite pleasurable.
That's right. When we're coherent, yes, absolutely. It's head, heart, and gut. It's through the vagal nerve.
Yeah.
Um, and I honor you for simplifying it, and yet it is the most profound advice I believe that could be given is that, just be still, which is not always easy to do in a world that requires to do things and to ask for what you need. I believe that the part that is wanting to integrate us, if you will, this non-physical part of us, if we may call it that, it does need to be asked. This some may call it a higher self. I believe it does need to be asked for guidance. And so when we're in that still coherent state, to ask, and will be received.
Yeah. And do you cultivate a practice of getting still? And I know we're busy and we don't have time, but I'll tell you, I do my best thinking. I don't subscribe to this meditation idea of, well, there's certainly practices and value in still, quiet mind. But my mind is very active. And And as the energy starts to really flow, it's pleasurable. It's like, I don't know why anybody would not want to do this. It feels so good. All of a sudden, I'm getting insights on a consistent basis, and I follow them, I play with them, and I do my best thinking. So it's not wasted time, it's actually compressed time, right? And I'll call my partner Bill and say, man, I had a real download this morning. And he's eager to hear because he knows that it's going to shape something we're working on. So it's not that it, it, it actually takes less time.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I
from a
get
leadership,
more, I get more creative work done in my moments of meditation than any other time of my day.
that's right.
Whole chapters of books drop in if I'm writing a book, and that's the needing to know, the asking. I'm stuck. I'm trying to figure out this chapter. After 3 days of nothing, I get the whole thing. So it's how creativity happens. It's the genesis of breakthrough. So this cultivating of still place where you can really be informed
That's right.
is really critical.
And it is a practice because it's about building that resilience capacity to be able to be coherent and to sustain that. And when we're in moments of incoherence, to um, pause, label how we feel, activate the heart, and yield some of the over attachments, the old meanings, the old stories, conditioning.
Yep.
So I'm so thankful for you, Bob. I feel like we can continue this for many, many more hours, and I would delight in every ounce of that. And I also honor your time today. And so, how can people learn even more about the Leadership Circle profile, this white paper on integral leadership, and of course, the many, many things that you have to share?
Yeah, well, the source for that is our website, leadershipcircle.com. The assessments are easy to find because they're front and center. The various resources are a little bit, behind some navigation. Under about our resources, so position papers I've written, books, and so on. And then there's a Deep Connect series. You mentioned Dean Radin. I mentioned Federico. I mentioned um, uh, various people. So there's those interviews are there. And then as this year rolls out with new workshops, I'm trying to integrate all that we did last year into a full academy or institute or school or curriculum. And I'm working on that right now and hope to have that up within the first quarter of this year. So stay tuned to our website and get on our mailing list, and you'll be well informed.
Wonderful. Well, Bob, I am deeply grateful for the work that you and others are doing on this. I believe that it is what uh, is going to create solutions that are going to heal our planet, heal our bodies, heal our communities, and create much more harmony and joy in our world. And so I thank you.
You're welcome. Right back at you.